I'm calling the meeting to order. So let's go ahead and go to roll call.
Carol Niederman, Lisa Roman,
Here.
Here. John Madsen.
Here.
Eric Horan.
Here. Let's take a quick moment of silence and for private reflection. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Archana Aliar.
Yes.
John Madsen.
Absolutely yes.
Lisa Roman.
Yes.
Eric Horan.
Yes. We are out. We're now to the superintendent with, what is that? I can't read it over there. Department updates. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm very excited to have you all here today to talk through our last year. We know we're still finishing out the end of this school year, but we have lots of great information to share from each of our departments. And if you will pull up the PowerPoint, we'll kind of get started here. As we all know, COVID really hit unexpectedly in the spring of 2020. And while our staff made it seem very easy, it's been a difficult undertaking to keep our schools open and continue to make forward progress over the past year and a half. We did have a decline in enrollment during the 2021 school year of approximately 200 students. However, that was understandable when parents were really grappling with the pandemic and trying to figure out how they wanted to best serve their families and their students. But this school year, our enrollment has rebounded, and we are up approximately 230 students. So we're very excited about that and very happy to be serving all of those students. Today, you're going to hear an update from each of our departments. Our directors will share that information. They're going to share the things they've worked on this school year and things they're already planning for next school year. This is the start, and I've talked with all of you about this, of our strategic planning process, which will take us into the new school year. We haven't engaged in this process in several years, so we are really excited about being able to have all of our stakeholders here and talking through what we want to see in the future of LHUSD. After today's presentation from our directors, we will present final school year data in July. So we're able to assess kind of our current reality, where we are with our student achievement, student services items, our business office, and our HR efforts for our staff. And then we will engage with a committee of stakeholders in August to review all of that data and begin the work of determining our path forward. Our teachers and administrators have done a great job of keeping our schools and students focused on learning, and I talk about that a lot during our school board meetings. But behind the scenes are our directors in each of their departments, and they have worked so hard to support every school, every employee, every program, every parent, and ultimately every student. They've done an amazing job, and I can't thank them enough for all of the work they have done. And I'm just really excited to have them share with you today what their departments have been working on. And we are going to start with student achievement.
Mr. President and Governing Board, we'll go through student achievement in the way that my department is organized. And so the first area that I oversee is curriculum. And so we talked about this through previous adoptions, current adoptions, and future adoptions. And so prior to this year, we adopted Singapore moving forward next year. It will be our 4th year. But we continued professional development. During the adoption, it was really pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and so we really did not have time to effectively support teachers, and so we've worked with Dr. Mahoney, who specifically supports Singapore schools, and we've worked with him and our teachers, and that has been very successful. For next year, in addition to the books, there's also ebooks that the teachers have. They are no longer going to have that. And so we're looking at an online platform. The benefit to that is there will also be an assessment platform. As you will see as we go through the slides, math is really an area of focus for us. And so this will give us some better data in the area of math, which we're lacking in compared to literacy. The platform also will allow us to sort by standard, and it adds videos for families, students, and teachers. And so those teacher videos of a teacher actually teaching the Singapore lesson is very, very important. We are starting to see with our more novice teachers who are maybe not coming to us with an education background or a math background, really anything post 3rd and 4th grade math. To be able to teach it, it's one thing to be able to do that math, but to be able to teach that math really becomes pretty difficult. And so these videos are just one more tool for teachers to be able to, with confidence, watch what it looks like in implementation. We will be in our 2nd year of CKLA next year, district-wide. Something that we've been focused on are Fidelity Walk-Throughs. So when we say that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, we mean that we know that students graduating from LHUSD will have been taught these skills and concepts, and we know that we have the time to do it. And so that doesn't happen just by giving teachers textbooks and telling them good luck. It happens with administrators, coaches, other teachers walking in and out of classrooms and providing support. And so it's not a gotcha. You weren't using this, but it's so we can have an understanding of, okay, what do we still need supports on? Where do we need to work on time? And so that is something that we've conducted for CKLA. We are updating our pacing guides based on year 1 implementation. So we know that there is a lot of material in core knowledge. And there's only so many minutes a day. And so we're really working through to see what can we accelerate, what do we need more time for, and so that way we'll have a slightly redesigned scope and sequence for teachers. Read 180 was previously adopted, but we didn't do a lot with the data. So this is an intervention program for students. It was used kind of in the classroom, but there wasn't really a lot of discussion of what does the data tell us? How do we know that students are beginning to read? And Read 180 is designed for middle school and high school. And so we really are now focused on the data. We just had a meeting set to meet with the principals, teachers, and my department, and Dr. Stone to look at the data. So where do we know that we're being successful with these struggling readers, and where do we know we need more support? Core knowledge, so that's going to be social studies and science. We need to focus on embedding literacy strategies. So those are some really nice textbooks, but what it doesn't really provide is information about how to effectively teach reading and writing using those textbooks. And so that is something that we're working on. Grade 8, so core knowledge was adopted for history last year, but they did not have their 8th grade history completed. It's still not completed at this time. That is world history. So right now we have the 7th grade curriculum for U.S. history split over 2 grades. So that will be an adjustment once core knowledge publishes world history. And then we're reordering consumables for 2023. Singapore and CKLA and core knowledge all has some levels of consumables, so there will be ongoing costs to those. And please just stop me at any time if you have questions. So this is looking at Amplify Science. So Amplify Science is the core knowledge science program. that was adopted for grades 6 through 8. It is a very technology-heavy curriculum. And one of the reasons why is because they're simulations. So students not only are learning about science in a phenomena-based way, but then they're doing simulations and lab activities. And so that's 500 users, so you can see there's pretty good usage when it comes to Amplify Science. And then when we break it down by school, we can see, I'm assuming that Smoke Tree teacher has to be using a student account or something because there's kids using it. So we see the teachers have been using it. And then we also can see that the students have been using it. And one of the things that we can see is there are some schools where there's not quite as high usage, and this is really a consideration as we're looking at the role of technology as it relates to curriculum. And so we know that in order to be fully integrated, the students have to be able to access laptops. And in some of these schools, there are not devices for all students or most students even. We did purchase 2 more laptop carts for Thunderbolt this year and 1 more cart for Smoke Tree using their Title I funds. And so that is something we know that is needed really starting at 6th grade in order to see full implementation of the curriculum. So here is ELA, grades 6 through 8. ELA also has an online component. And the reason why this online component is important is the teacher really can collect data. It's one thing when I grade student work and I think, oh, these kids, I think they're missing that, but I can't quite see the pattern. But when we have teachers using technology to grade, they're really starting to be able to understand the patterns of what students are missing. So you can see this number, although it looks nice, it's only out of 100. And so we see a much lower usage of ELA than science. Part of it is because the science really won't work without the technology. The ELA, they can make it work, but it's just not at their fullest capacity. And so we can see there are much lower numbers. And part of this is there may be 1 cart that's split between 6th grade. And so you have to make a choice. Are they either using it for science or are they using it for ELA? It's not realistic to use them for both. For Thunderbolt, those carts, Mr. Hall really made a decision. The carts had been in the library for years prior. He moved them up into the hallways and into teachers' rooms, so there's much more access. But there's still not quite enough carts to go around, especially since we have 2 math teachers out and the students are using carts for math. So this is an area that we're talking about to support teachers. So for current adoption, so this year we adopted English and math. Just because the adoption happened, it just means like that we're beginning. And so we're currently working on scope and sequence and novels. There's currently a committee made up of teachers, parents, students to look at the long reads that teachers will do, and that will come before the board soon. And we're looking at summer professional development for the teachers. So we do not want to just give this to teachers and wish them good luck. Math, you can see math had a much easier time developing their scope and sequence than English. They're already done. And so that is an example that will then continue to be fleshed out. And we have professional development for teachers in math. Future adoptions, social studies and science are slated for 23-24, so secondary social studies and science. We had our very first meeting with teachers to talk about what the process would look like and just to start getting them thinking and for us to have a better understanding of what it looks like. When we're thinking about adoption for the sciences, it really looks different than anything we've adopted. Chemistry looks very different than biology. Students are coming in through different pathways. So we have a lot of conversations there. And then thinking about what social studies will look like when our students really have had, and science too, strong content knowledge in the early grades. The cycle will look the same. We have electives slated for 24-25. Something that we know is there is a need to refresh some equipment and instruments at all sites. I've been working with Mr. Murray to target using some capital funds and some grant funds to just try to target little wins at the high school and middle school right now. We know we need some weight equipment at the middle school, and we know that the high school and middle school band is in need of equipment. That equipment's very expensive. We just purchased a sousaphone. It's $5,000. And so thinking about the costs of band equipment and how we are going to sustainably support that long-term is something that we'll work on together, but we know that that's important. And so when you talk to teachers in these elective areas, many of them haven't had new heavy equipment, so not like a basketball, but those expensive pieces of equipment in a very long time. So we want to think about long-term, not just next year. And so looking at the adoption cycle, and even if we're not going to adopt, to refine the current curriculum constantly. With curriculum, so Mrs. Sotner, she oversees curriculum. She also oversees English learners. We currently serve 128 English learning students. 98 of those receive direct services, and 30 of those are on monitor status. So they have tested as proficient, but we still are required to follow their progress. We work with these students in both targeted and integrated minutes. There are pathways that are designed by the state in order to be in compliance. You have to meet these pathways. And so if you'll see the targeted minutes, direct instruction is only with EL students and served by an SEI endorsed general education teacher. So if you think that some of our schools, they might only have one EL student, that one EL student has to get direct services only with EL students. And so thinking about ways to do that, thinking about the importance for our teachers to have their structured English immersion endorsement, which is no longer required by the state. There was a short window of time where it was, but finding people that are appropriately endorsed to service these students as required by state and federal law is something that is very important. These students also have integrated minutes, and those are when they're in heterogeneous groupings. But again, you notice that they are with an SEI endorsed teacher. This year, using Title III funds, which is for English learners, we were able to provide professional development for teachers, student tutoring for EL students, summer school, and we really focused on increased communication with families. One of the things, there is an EL coordinator that she serves in my department, mostly to test. We test EL students all year long at entrance. We had a field test this year and then the end of the year, and she also works with the EL families to provide them other academic supports. Second area is data and assessment. This, I believe, any of our principals would tell you has been not an area of strength for us. This is something that we are learning to effectively use. I think we all had access to mountains of data, and we're not really effective in making meaning. And so we really focused this year on developing a data culture. And that was implementation of a new platform, which is Illuminate DNA. And it really was, we now have a data and accountability coach who she really is able to support both teachers and leaders' understanding of student data. We've provided ongoing professional development and training. We've developed a district assessment calendar. It was really important to us just to do a data inventory. What tests are we giving to who and when and why? And we put it all on one paper, and I know that's like, oh, duh, but really taking a look at all of the assessments that students are getting. And then the development of a balanced assessment and really asking who's responsible for what is the purpose? Are we testing kids just to test kids? What are we doing with the data? And so this balanced assessment approach, you can see that that triangle, that pyramid. And so at the very top, you've got national and state tests, benchmark assessments that tell us how our students are doing as they They take assessments on the standards that will support them on those assessments, common assessments, so those are typically curriculum-based, so what do all history students know at the end of the semester? Classroom summative assessments, classroom formative assessments. The yellow and purple, really the bottom three, will really start to look at as more common assessments. As teachers have one curriculum that they're using, they're able to share across school sites and outside of their classroom and have meaningful conversations about what students are learning. We're really focused on making sure that our assessments are necessary, high quality, and linked to learning goals. And then we're using them to modify instruction. And then you can see that is, I believe that's a grade. And so those are all the assessments that that students take in that grade. If you look on our portal, teachers can click on those links to have more information about those, but really helping teachers understand when tests are happening. It's not just a surprise. So thinking about data is really, well, what's it telling us? And so what I'm going to show you is just one snapshot in a lot of data, but it's something that we're thinking about. So we can see, so this is 3rd grade through 8th grade. So these students are taking the AASA Mimic. So this test it mimics what students will do on the state required assessment. The AASA is brand new. It previously was AZ Merit, AZM2. We don't see a lot of differences, but it has been retitled. So you can see that in 3rd and 4th grade, students perform about the same on ELA and math. You can see from 5th to 8th grade in math, there is a precipitous decline in math skills. And again, this is one assessment, one day, but other assessments that we're taking tell us something similar. We know that there's a decline. We see that very commonly when students get into middle school, but this is reason to give us some concern. How are we supporting students in math? We have many supports on the literacy side. We don't have those same supports on the math side. And so I'll talk about those needs as we move forward. We can see in grades 3 through 5, so these are the specific strands in ELA. So you can see in grades 3 through 5, they're stronger in reading strands for literature and writing and language standards. And then they're weaker in reading for informational text. And then that starts to shift. So in 6th and 7th grade, they're stronger in informational text and those writing and language standards, but weaker in literature. And so we're wondering if this is the type of text that they're starting to see. We can imagine that in middle school, they're going to start seeing more informational text and maybe less of that literature. And then grade 8, again, they're strong in reading strands for informational text, and they're weaker in the writing and language standards. But those, for the most part, we see similar patterns across. In math, our students in 3rd through 5th grade are strongest in number sense and word problems. That has been a huge area of focus this year. They're weakest in measurement and geometry, with exception to 3rd grade geometry. Then you can see in 6 through 8, they're stronger in ratio and proportion, stronger in expressions and equations, weaker in geometry and statistics and probability. Remember that 7th and 8th grade currently has not gone through a math adoption, right? So 6th grade is Singapore, and then we do not have a coherent adopted curriculum in middle school. So it's kind of piecemeal together. And so this, while it is a concern, we know that the adoption of a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which just happened, will support this for many reasons. So moving on to high school. High school is now moving into the world of ACT testing. That is their state test. It's beneficial for a number of reasons. So ACT testing helps compare us to to the national. It's not just comparing around the state. It also is a predictor of how students will do in college. And although college is not the only place that we know students will go leave us for after high school, we want students who are interested to be able to be successful in college. And we know that students who are interested in ROTC and other programs benefit by practicing and doing well at these assessments. And so this is 10th grade. So we now give pre-ACTs. A student, before they take the actual ACT, will take a pre-ACT 8 times. And so the idea of practice, what does a test like this look like? And so they will take a pre-mid-post freshman year, pre-mid-post sophomore year, and then a pre and a mid, and then the real test their junior year. And so we have seen improvements on scores. So far, the students have all taken it 2 times. We've seen improvements on scores already. Mr. Becker and his staff have something like this for all of them. They're really starting to talk about why students are testing this way. How can we move students that are, and so I'm guessing, I feel like the national average is somewhere around here-ish. Mr. Becker had it marked, it's right around here. So if we're able to move these 2 big bars of students, just 1 or 2 points, what does that do? And so this is really exciting to talk about small shifts and big shifts in a really meaningful way. And you can see, so in real time, they're looking at who these students are, what classes are they in, how are we supporting them? So what our current data shows us, and again, these are all different grades. They'll actually take this test this time in 11th grade. Our 9th grade students have areas of strength, production of writing, knowledge of language, and conventions of English. 10th grade areas of strength, production of writing, knowledge of language, conventions of English. And then you can see 11th grade areas of strength, production of writing, knowledge of language, and statistics and probability. And so looking at areas of strength, we don't really see areas of strength pop up until junior year. And so again, that importance of that strong curriculum to support teachers in the middle school and the high school, we're hoping and working with them so that we see areas in math earlier than 11th grade. Areas needing growth, functions, geometry, integration of knowledge and ideas. In 10th grade, functions, and then we see some science ones, and I'll talk about science in just a second. Evaluation of models, scientific investigations when we go to 11th grade, geometry, integration of knowledge and ideas, and scientific investigations. So we see areas of growth as science, and the science test is really just a reading test. They're not doing experiments. They're not writing research. They're really reading. And so how are we supporting students reading in the content area, science and social studies? And so we're excited to see how having a strong core curriculum coming up will change that. And again, Mr. Becker, and I'll talk about that in a second, the importance of students having access to do labs and write research reports. Right now, currently we have sometimes 5 or 6 students crowding around a lab, and maybe one lab partner does a little bit better job than the rest of them, and everyone else is copying. What does it look like in a technology-rich environment where students are able to do simulations and write their own research? And so that's an area of interest for him. State testing, so just some things for you all to think about. Every single one of our state assessments is on a new platform. And so there's nothing really that is the same. I guess Azella is the same REL test, but just realize that our students and our teachers are all working on something that they weren't familiar with. Grades 3 through 8 are testing online. The state does not allow for the AASA to be taken by paper. And so those students will all be doing online testing. And so thinking about if you're Starline and you have access to one computer lab and then a limited number of carts, kind of what that looks like. And then even if you're Thunderbolt Middle School that's currently using carts for that science and ELA, like I showed you, you're now also working with testing. Grades 9 and 11 are taking paper tests. Havasu online students will be testing at the district office. They also will be taking the same tests that our brick and mortar students will be taking. They will be doing all their testing online. And to make all of this work, it is a huge partnership between tech, the data coach, the counselors, and the principals. This is a lot of work to make sure that this happens every year for all students. And then our CTE is also testing at this time. They're giving the technical skills assessments for students who complete their program. Literacy and move on when reading. Our data coach also oversees move on when reading because it is very data heavy. This year we began to implement our required dyslexia screener that is required by state law. It changed the types of DIBELS tests that we gave just a little bit. We were also required to send at least one teacher from each site to dyslexia training. It was 6 days of training. We chose our interventionists because they serve students in the area of literacy. We want them to utilize their expertise to develop an entire school's ability to work as reading teachers, and our focus is on early intervention. Move on when reading, so making sure students are able to read by 3rd grade in order for them to move on. Just something for you to know is we field tested oral reading fluency, so now our 3rd grade students, when they're taking state tests, they have to read a passage and speak into a microphone, and that will become part of the test next year. This is DIBELS data. And so what's really nice working with Amplify is we meet with them 3 times a year to look at our data with them and compare it to the national average. I just turned. So this right here is our kindergarten students. This is the national average in 21, and this is going to be 2022. This is our students this year. So our kindergartners are coming in well below the national average. We can see that. This is our first graders. Our first graders are still below the national average, but what we see when we move on to 2nd and 3rd grade is our 3rd graders are now above the national average. I'm sorry, our 2nd graders and our 3rd graders are just below. And so there's huge growth. So this is students coming in. But that is really an area that we need to be mindful of, is our students are not coming in with the literacy skills that their national peers are. This is the middle of the year test. So this was a later DIBELS test that looked at literacy. And so these are the same cohort of students. So these are these guys right here. And so although we're still below the national average mid-year, there's huge amounts of growth that are being made. Same here. We're still below the national average, but lots and lots of growth. And so then again, middle of the year, we're above the national average. And so we know that our literacy programming is working, but thinking, yeah, even though we catch up, that's great. We still have students who are not able to read, and we know that just has an impact on their entire academic future. And so really making sure that we are meeting the needs of all students, not just saying, good job, we beat the national average. No, there's still students that we need to serve to support their reading. Educational technology. We also have a technology coach. So just knowing that there's technology that was needed for past adoptions, ELA and Amplify Science require online access. And we have deployed carts to 6th through 8th grade. I think we likely would need to deploy some more in order to fully implement. For current adoptions, both Big Ideas and HMH have an online platform, and thinking about what that looks like for students to use. And I'll talk about that in a second. M-Class, which is our DIBELS, our early literacy screener. This is an example of what it would look like for someone to do the DIBELS assessment. The teacher or the aide works with the touch screen, and they score the test. So if you know, we used to DIBEL by hand. You maybe got your children's DIBELS score written down, but we now have everything in a database, and the principals are able to look at how to support specific cohorts of students' classes. It also places students into reading groups with assigned intervention material. So it can say, you have 3 students, you're weak in this. And it tells the interventionist or the aide, like, here's what we need to work on. It's very explicit. And then just thinking about educational technology with future adoptions. Digital access, when we talk to teachers in science and social studies, digital access was their top priority of what they wanted to see. So considerations, as we adopted and as we are working through curriculum, something that came up from both the ELA and math committee, and it was from parents, something that came up was, will students have access to technology? There are many, many supports for students, but what does that look like when a student leaves the classroom? And so we have had a lot of talk about implementation of one-to-one, which a year ago even I would not have suggested. I don't think that we were ready, but I now think the board and we really need to deeply consider if we should be moving to a one-to-one device for Lake Havasu High School. And I'll talk about the reasons why. And so as the parent, I will tell you, when the parent asked me, I thought, oh my gosh, we're not getting computers for every kid, you're crazy. But then when you think about it, if students need access to those supports, we are basically saying to this group of students who have access, great, you can get that online tutor. Great, you can watch that amazing video again and again. Not so much for you. And so that really did start our wheels turning. The teachers also said, we want to be able to assign specific things. So we have met, myself, Dr. Stone, Mr. Murray, and the technology department to start talking this through. So some things that have come into consideration, our devices have filters that are operational in and out of the district. So when they go home, they are still SIPA compliant. They still have firewalls that will protect them and their web browsing. We know that we would need to hold family programs about device and technology use. We have been speaking to other districts. What's been great, if we're late adopters, is we are not the first one who is doing this. We have lots and lots of experience to learn from. We have talked to multiple districts about what it has looked like for them, and they recommended family involvement as being very, very important. We know that we would have to develop policies and procedures around one-to-one devices. So what does it mean to be a responsible user of a device in and out of school? And we also know that we need to teach digital citizenship and safety explicitly throughout high school. And so we have digital citizenship lessons, but a lot of times they're taught in the computer lab and they're not actually taught by a teacher. And so thinking about this increased technology that is coming through school and just the changes, not even looking at this, just the changes that we see our students, you know, the difference between my 18-year-old and his computer usage or device usage looks very different than my 23-year-old's device usage, which will look very different than Mrs. Bitterman and Mr. Murray's young children device uses. And so just really being supportive partners for students as they're using digital devices. The educational benefits for one-to-one, assignments are turned in via devices. It allows our teachers to use data. So again, when I think about myself grading hand-to-hand, I don't see the patterns emerging. When I'm able to click through and score that way, those teachers are immediately able to say, I know that my students are having an issue with X. It allows for differentiation and scaffolded supports. And so we saw that there was different scaffolds. So, you know, this student might be assigned this slightly different assignment that still does the same thing. Teachers can assign specific units or assignments on online platforms. It provides equal access, and science would benefit greatly from increased access to simulations. So thinking we don't just all have to sit and look at the one cow heart. We are all able to look at all of those pieces and then able to do simulations. And I strongly encourage you to stop by our middle school to look at what they're able to do. So it's much more now than the lab that we were able to see. They're able to replicate experiments using computer design and replay that experiment 9 and 10 and thousands of times to talk about what would happen. Our current resources, currently our technology infrastructure will support one-to-one. So the technology, you know, the work that they did to build our infrastructure will support a device-rich school system. Our Wi-Fi access is strong at LHHS and throughout the district, but we're just talking about LHHS. Laptops would be collected annually for inspection, and so thinking about those processes that we would want to develop to make sure that laptops are coming back to us in good shape. Our staffing will support one-to-one. As we talk to different school systems, they feel confident that the staffing that we have is adequate. We know that there would be a huge rise in order to get computers ready, but then it kind of dies down. The one area that they suggest is looking for a help desk. So what do students do when they get lost? And what they say is that happens in the early days and then it kind of goes by the wayside. They also talked about a face-to-face student help desk that is possibly supported by CTE students. And so really when you're looking at devices, having similar devices or the same devices, so the fix is the fix is the fix. And the technology department, along with business, is working to determine sustainable funding. To me, that is the most important piece, is really making sure that this is not a one-time thing. We know that devices would need to be refreshed every 4 to 6 years. And so what is the cost to that, and how long can we do that for? And so that is a very important piece. Other considerations, and these are not all of them, but these are some things that stood out to me, is understanding the professional development that will be needed for our teachers in order to be able to use devices effectively. So I'm not using a device to use a device. I'm making sure that I am using it to support my students' learning, and then how can I support their use at home? And so that happens with training. Also for teachers, just to understand how the devices work, what things they should be looking for, questions they should be asking students as we make those changes. And then we've talked a lot. You'll hear from lots of people, well, at my school, we blah, blah, blah. So in the state of Arizona, we cannot charge a technology fee to pass on that cost to families, but we could have families pay for insurance. And so it's very important that we price out every single possible thing. This is how much a key costs, a screen costs, a little mouse thing. And so you can either pay for it when it breaks, or you can purchase insurance to protect the device. Questions?
That's a touchpad.
Yeah, thank you. Not mouse thing. Does anybody else have any questions about this? Okay. So this is I will tell you, not something that I necessarily thought we were coming to this year, but really we heard from families, students, that this is where they need to be going. And then in the conversation with teachers, they would like to see this. When I talk to other school systems, this is the target audience. We're not asking for one-to-one, anything less. We know that we need more devices, but there really isn't a reason for them to take them home. But we know that the students leaving the school system, this is the world they will go into. And so it seems appropriate to support all students equitably that we made this move. So in technology, we're also working on a repository of teacher videos. We know that teachers need supports, and sometimes they need them on the fly. And so we've started looking at our practices, and teachers can just click. They'll be told, you need to do formative assessments, or you need to have higher level thinking questions. And so how do they do that? They can now watch videos and have supports. We're also sending out monthly tech tips, walkthrough videos, how to use the different technology. And really, we had a major shift in the technology department of moving to SharePoint. And so that move, OneDrive and SharePoint, has been overall successful, but making sure we're still supporting staff with that learning. Something that we're focused on for next year, currently all of our elementary schools have a computer lab, and one of the specials that students rotate to is computer lab. However, each school has operated their computer lab pretty unilaterally. They have some similar software, some different software. The past few years have asked them to articulate and meet, but they haven't quite had a curriculum. We haven't quite said to them, students who leave 4th grade, we expect them to learn this. And so for next year, we will be rolling out that scope and sequence, so we know that all 3rd graders will be learning this in the computer lab, and all 4th graders. We also are looking to streamline our educational software. One of the areas is math. Right now, some schools have IXL, some schools have MobiMax, some schools have Digital Coach. They're all having different things with different things, and they're not really being able to collect data on them. We're going to go to one thing. So Singapore is taught in the classroom. We know that there are students who need interventions. This is the intervention tool. We're working to decide which best fits them. We also know we want them to translate their Singapore learning back into how test questions will be answered. And so we're excited for that to happen. Professional learning. So this is just our professional learning that we offered this year. Next year, our areas of focus will be Tier 2, so providing interventions. If students aren't getting it, how do we bring them into small groups to help them learn it in different ways? Also, accessible math. We know that math is an area of focus, and how do we make sure that students are prepared for math at the next level? And then literacy strategies in both reading and writing. And we see this in social studies and science are our 2 areas of focus. Just for your understanding, this year we served 59 Year 1 mentees, 30 Year 2 mentees, with 68 mentor teachers. That is a lot. We know that we're expecting a large mentee class, and so we are redesigning how we are supporting novice teachers. We will be changing to group mentoring from one-to-one. The reality is right now we have many very novice teachers that are mentoring because that's who we have. So we want to make sure that we have groups and then a really effective mentor to support them. And so we know that those relationships are very important. We're going to be moving to a 6-day educator orientation. We've been on a 5-day for new teacher orientation. We're adding a day. Again, our teachers are coming in. They're much more novice. They're much more likely to be on an alternative certification. We have more programming and curriculum. We need them to learn the things. So we'll be adding a day. And then in Year 1, we'll be focused on lesson planning and modeling lessons, so giving teachers a chance to model in a safe space to teach a lesson, to refine those skills. Year 2 will be Kagan. Those are engagement strategies. So students are involved in their learning, classroom management, and thinking maps. And Year 3 will be an action research cycle. In math, we have a math coach. We have given Singapore professional development to paraprofessionals. So knowing that aides support students, it's important that they understand the math that we're using. Dr. Mahoney has worked with our teachers on conceptualization of number sense and fractions. We're planning professional development with him for next year. An area that we're really proud of is family engagement. We served over 500 families to help them better understand Singapore at 5 elementary schools. We also had a lot of fun playing math games and using math tools. So how can families support math learning in different ways than just screaming at your kids because their homework looks different than yours? So we were really excited about that. Lake Havasu High School has asked if we'll have a family engagement math night with them last night, and we're excited to bring that to the secondary level. Dr. Mahoney is going to be recording some videos for families. So although Larry Olson's amazing, he cannot be everywhere, every place, every time. So we'll be adding some more family engagement with Singapore. Again, data analysis, helping math teachers understand where there are areas that they need to grow and they need to support their students. We are focused on math intervention. In grades 6, K through 6, we talked about one of the ways is through computer programming. We're looking to add Math 180 next year. We have Read 180 currently, but we're looking to add Math 180 for algebra readiness. How do we make sure that all students are ready for algebra by grade 9? And so that is an area of focus. Accessible math, so bringing back mini math, which is just a structure that math teachers do at the beginning of their lesson to help students practice problems and talk about how they're solving their problems, and then supporting the reading and questioning strategies of teachers as it relates to math. We know that our 8th grade math is an area of focus. We currently are seeking highly qualified teachers, but we are working with ASOC to fill the need now. This is again why a guaranteed and viable curriculum is so important. So we're able to say, here, let us support you, which we aren't necessarily able to do when this teacher created this long ago. CTE, we're really proud of our career and technical education department. 97% of our CTE concentrators graduate with their cohort. So a concentrator is someone who took at least 2 years of the same CTE pathway. 86% graduate with an industry certification. We are 13% above the state level of performance on technical skills. In every single area, we exceeded the state. So we are very, very proud of our CTE program and really how it supports so many students. It's something that has grown wildly since I've been here and really is continuing to grow and really be a gem under the direction of Marcia Becker. Some of the things that they've been working on, they updated and sequenced their curriculum. They've really been focused on services for special populations. So there was a time where we were maybe not so comfortable, teachers were maybe not so comfortable with students with special needs coming into the auto shop, coming into cabinet making. There was lots of reasons why that wasn't the right place. And so really making sure that those programs are accessible for students. And so that has been a strong area of focus for them the last couple of years. They have a CTE counselor that's working on transition services. 18 students completed the career exploration internships. We had 4 8th grade days, which included Calvary as well. We're going to add HPA next year. They also are sending their students to the high school. That leads up to CTE open house. We added fire science. There's 9 students in the pilot. That is very successful. The fire chief has been very, very positive about this program. There was just an article in the newspaper. There was a donation made to the program about the breaking in door. CTE held a hiring event. 12 businesses attended, multiple interviews were held. we're looking at the instructional time model for next year. Things like engineering, we haven't quite figured out. We're probably not going to find an engineering or physics teacher, and so we've really fought. We want to keep our kids welcome. Yes, we really want to keep our kids on campus, but we need to start talking about what does our partnership with MCC look like. What if they go over for physics? What if they go over for engineering? And so we're continuing to have those conversations. And then just for your awareness, the Shining Knight Awards is May 2nd at 5:30 p.m. There will be 142 industry certifications awarded at that time. That's a lot. Havasu Online. So just think, last year we magically had an online program, and so we're looking to solidify and support that program. Starting enrollment was 108, current enrollment is 179. So that number really has fluctuated. There are students enrolling daily, and there's students that leave as well. So it's a more transient school. We've had 43 students who have moved, dropped, went back to LHHS. We definitely had some graduate in December as well. We're also serving a small number of K-6 students who have health issues. We have a full-time teacher, a stipend teacher, a part-time counselor. We added a part-time assistant. The work really just grew to be too much, and a part-time administrator. He currently works at 2 schools in addition to Havasu Online. The teacher grades and has tutoring hours. The students will take their state exams in Pbis. This is an LHHS program, so Havasu Online really is a program of Lake Havasu High School. Those students will graduate with a diploma. So we want those students to participate in all that LHHS or Thunderbolt has to offer, unless for some reason they are suspended from physical locations, but then they're welcome to be on our online program. Where we're headed, we really see the need next year that we'll have a full-time administrator, so pulling him back from those schools. There is really a lot that happens in managing 200 students. And so we're looking for that change. We're also looking at learning lab times for struggling students. With online students who are not successful in brick and mortar school, sometimes they're really not successful in online. So just providing as many opportunities as we can. A homeroom within PLP for announcements. We're continuing to clarify policies and procedures, and then creating our own school culture. So yes, we're a program of the high school, but how do students feel connected to one another? This is just a very high level of federal and state grants. So this is our current year grant, but some areas of focus is we have after-school tutoring at all of our Title I schools. Many of them have 6 and 7 tutors. We're working to prepare for summer school right now, including kindergarten boot camp. So when I showed you those lower than national average reading scores or literacy scores coming in, things like kindergarten boot camp are very important. And then just a reminder that we also do provide services for the private schools. So federal grant dollars come to us, and we have to administer to them to private schools if they so wish. Looking at Title II, paid new teacher orientation, hard-to-fill stipends, mentor teachers, and then the professional development for curriculum implementation. We've also been able to support Pbis training, which Aggie will talk about, sending our gifted teachers to the Gifted Conference, and we've got a cohort of staff from Oro Grande going to the Classical Education Symposium in Phoenix. Title III is EL, and so again, our areas of focus, tutoring, families, and professional development. Title IV is Rachel's Challenge. It's roughly $20,000 a year. What I'm planning on doing with that extra Title IV money, because that can also be used for well-rounded students, is focusing on some of those short-term PE and music wins that we need to spend down that little bit of extra money. But I think those 2 areas are good, strong areas for Title IV. And then our Arizona New Teacher Program out of AZ K-12 is $75,000. That was a lot. So now I've got just a little bit more. One of the things that I walked us into, or the Heisler helped walk us into, that wasn't so pleasant, was Latin honors. And so We've not revisited it, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands the reason why. I have recently met with some of the families to talk about this. And so the way that we calculate GPA was changed a number of years ago. And this current students have had their GPAs calculated in two different ways. This is the most current way, and this is just an example of why GPA, there's a lot of unintended consequences. So this first student, he's in all honors classes. He's a senior. He's got 4 classes. We currently give 1 GPA point, so 5 out of 4 if you're in an honors class. So this student is in 4 honors classes. That's it. His GPA is 5. He gets out at noon. The next student, that student, instead of taking honors math and money, took a more rigorous course, took AP Calculus, also a great course, but they got a B in AP Calculus. That student's GPA is lower than the first student who did not get a B, but I think we can all agree that AP Calculus is much more rigorous than honors math and money, which is a great course, and I really hear from so many parents, they're so happy their honors students will take it. Kind of doing a little S, the next student has 5 courses. This student took the 4 honors classes, but they're also a member of student council, or maybe band, or yearbook, or fill in the blank of whatever other co-curricular is important to them. Because student council, band, weightlifting, whatever it is not an honors course, their GPA is lower than the first student who only took 4 classes. So this student is getting quote-unquote punished for taking that extra leadership course. The next student, same 4 courses, but this student went to MCC, and they're taking an HVAC class or an art class or any other class. They got an A in it. They also have a lower GPA than the first student with just 4 classes. The next student took 4 classes, but they also took a Primavera or any other online charter school class. And they were able to boost their GPA by taking that Primavera class. So if they take classes at charter schools that we offer, they get the grade, and that says so in law. And so while it's an honors class, we don't necessarily know what the level of rigor is. The next student, they took 3 honors classes, but they're in the block advanced cabinet making class that we offer. That's 2 periods a day. That student has a 4.6 GPA. So because that student took a very advanced class, they have a GPA that's even lower than student council or the kid who got a B. The next student, they got a C in honors civics. But because they were able to take that honors Primavera class, they still have the same GPA as the student with straight A's who's taking cabinet making. And then this student, they decided they wanted to go a full day. These are all pretend people, by the way. They wanted to go a full day. Their mom said, "You must go a full day. It's important. You're not going to get out early." They took their 3 honors classes, the block of advanced cabinet making, weightlifting. They're on the baseball team. They have the lowest GPA. And so this is really to show you that the GPAs can be pretty arbitrary. So when we look at GPA, we're not necessarily looking at who the strongest student is. We are not looking at who's most likely to go on to an Ivy League college. We're actually not even looking at students who will get the most amount of scholarship money in state. In state, all of the public universities are looking at unweighted GPA. They are not looking at weighted GPA because it is so varied. When we look at California's schools, they only look at weighting core classes. When we look at, so I've got the 3 public universities, again, it's all unweighted. When we look at, I picked Harvard. There's no single academic path we expect all students to follow, but the strongest applicants take the most rigorous courses. I looked at George Washington again. They review each applicant based on applicant background, academic background, rigor of coursework, and GPA. In addition, they consider essays, letters, extracurricular activities. So schools are all different, and by us kind of moving away and really moving to Latin honors, I know really the only public ranking right now that happens, the top 20 dinner, K-12 has done away with that. They're focused just on academic achievement, not just top 20. And then the top 10 who stand at graduation. It isn't necessarily the top 10 students are the ones who get into the Naval Academy, into the highest ranked colleges. We see every year salutatorians, valedictorians come back. They weren't successful. We see kids who were 15th go on and get into very, very successful colleges. And so, as you all move forward with really the decision of salutatorian and valedictorian, these are the considerations. We know that we have parents who have tabs on what every other student gets, and they're tracking their GPAs. That has been around for a very, very long time. And is that good for students? So I just wanted to leave you with that.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
No, I'm done. Okay, so successes this year. I'm almost done. Moving closer to a guaranteed and viable curriculum at all grades, supporting principals through professional development. We had professional development for principals very early on in this year, and then my team also works with them as instructional leaders. Professional learning for all based on data. Secondary really has dug into data to make decisions about their courses. That was probably an area that they were most uncomfortable with, and they've done a great job. Second, setting goals to make sure that data supports the overall mission of graduating students who are college and career ready. A lot of times we get very stuck on, this is what third grade is and fourth grade, so how do we bring that out? Continue working with grade level teams to effectively align curriculum, instruction, and assessments. Working with teams how to use results from assessments to support student learning. Another success is really visiting with Amplify to look at data compared to national. Staff is using SharePoint successfully. Teachers can log into educational software aligned to curriculum easily. Articulation has been very successful. It's given teachers the ability and time to plan, implement, and reflect. We also share our articulation notes with principals. We've had improved communication with EL families about testing and what proficiency looks like. Gifted education, communication to staff and families. Family engagement nights. We will be having a focus group in the next coming weeks to meet on homework grading, curriculum pacing, and assessment. And so we know that homework looks widely different at different schools, grading practices, assessment, and so we're really trying to get all those things so we're working as a unified school district.
And just one thing for this department, you notice some significant changes in all of the areas, curriculum instruction and assessment, professional learning, technology. While all those changes have started, true implementation, it's a 3 to 5 year change process before those things become embedded in your culture. So really focusing on them and keeping those efforts going during that time is important, that we don't just stop midstream and start something new. So I am excited about all the work, but just reminding everybody that it really does take time to get that embedded. The other piece that I wanted to mention is one of the things we're working on, really in all our departments, but especially in this department with all those new things, are the access points that parents have to that information. So there's more information than ever on our website about curriculum, technology, all of the things that they have access to. And with the new curriculums that we're adopting, they have those parent rooms, family rooms, where they can go and have access to tutoring and videos and all those things that their students also have access to. So just a couple points for that department, but a lot of great things going on. going to move on to human resources.
Okay, Mr. President and Governing Board, in Human Resources, we are a pretty new team of 5. 3 of the 5 of us are new in our roles, and when we started out this year, we said we really need to look at 2 major areas, recruiting and retention, so that's sort of what this will focus on. So as a department, we meet monthly. In the recruiting world, we've really tried to focus on a positive first impression, looking at a seamless process, and then being creative in how we recruit people, but then also balancing that against the compliance measures that are in policy and also in statute. Recruiting is, as you all know, it's the era of the Great Resignation, so this has never stopped this year. Recently, though, we have gone to 3 job fairs in teams, our Northern Arizona University Department of Education, and then we decided to try Dixie State this year. We haven't been to Utah, but I am from Idaho, and recently I feel like I've been an Idaho magnet. We have a lot of people reaching out from Idaho, Utah. So we gave that a try, and we are still waiting to see sort of how fruitful those fairs and events were. We may do an in-person fair in the end of the school year if we see that there's still a need. So some changes to our recruiting efforts. We decided to go with a digital job fair application. So as applicants walked up to our booth, which you can see there, they quickly scan a QR code. It takes them about 30 seconds to share their information with us, and then we can do a quick electronic screener. We are continuing to work with ASU and Mojave Community College to capture students that are either entering the teacher education fields or nearing graduation, and trying to scoop them in as early as possible for practicum and then student teaching. We have spent a lot of time promoting our openings all year long again through multiple platforms. Indeed, we do use Frontline, which automatically posts to the K-12 job spot, Arizona Department of Ed. You've seen us on social media promoting the Chamber, White Sheet, and our local newspaper as well.
Out of those promoting openings, which one tends to be the most effective?
I can't say there's one. I would say it's dependent upon the position we're looking for. We tend to have a greater turnout from our classified staff through the Herald, Chamber, White Sheet, those more local print-based advertisements. I'm getting a lot of hits on Indeed for administrative openings. Some of those more specialized fields seem to do better on those virtual platforms that are far-reaching. I think people are more willing to relocate for an administrative position than perhaps a support position. Recruiting also extends to subs. We've been recruiting subs all year long. All of these people sitting up here have been a sub at one point for one thing or another. We have hired 46 new subs since August. We oftentimes hire those subs if they're really good. And just since January, we've had 11 new come on as well. And that kind of goes to creativity. We're always looking at ways to work around the teacher shortage. This is the first year of the LHUSD Bridge program. So Ms. Festa took this to the State Board of Ed in June, and then it was passed over to me to make sure that it is being leveraged and supporting our community and our local community talent. So this program is specifically for teachers on an alternative certification pathway. They have a bachelor's, but it's not particularly in teaching. So we recognize these people have maybe a depth of knowledge in biology or math, but they don't know how to convey that to middle school or high school or elementary. We have had a number of staff that we've found as excellent subs that will next year transition from subbing to being a certified employee for us and join the Bridge program. Right now, this cohort is 5 teachers. It actually started as a higher number. Some of the teachers found they were just maybe one test away, and they were able to fast track through that, so that number's come down since the start of the year. We already have for next year 4 teachers slated for this. And you'll see MCC's logo up there. This program is a joint effort between our student achievement master teachers. They lead monthly seminars, and then our MCC program supports them with one course per semester that really kind of hones in the foundations of education. And same thing, just stop me if you need me to clarify or elaborate. We also looked at length at our hiring and onboarding efforts. Last year, we decided to leave Winocular as our hiring tool, and we transitioned to Frontline. So we've been really going back and forth looking at what is effective, what's working efficiently, and where are those sort of bumps, and trying to smooth those out. So we're looking at a new approach. We have 2 specialists that really support in the hiring. So Laura, she is taking on the pre-boarding, and her real emphasis is on hospitality, positive first impression. We want people to see this is our level of professionalism for ourselves, but also the expectation for you as you're hired on with us. Her job, you can see up there, is that warm welcome. So after the principal interviews and says, this is the candidate I'm recommending for hire, she reaches out, she begins, I call it the Easter egg hunt, getting the official transcripts, the employment verification. We do also have her check the IVP card, and also to see if there's any disciplinary history on file with the state board. Once all of that is cleared, then we've transitioned to tech. They're comfortable at that point establishing accounts. So now we have 2-way communication going back and forth from student services, student achievement, the site level. Those people are getting that information much more quickly in this process. Then it moves on to hiring, and you can see all the steps there. Those aren't really changes. It's just that it should flow smoother if we are doing pre-boarding effectively, and then it does eventually flow to payroll and benefits. I do want to just recognize the business department and the technology department in partnering with us, because it's taken a total team effort to make this a really positive experience for the employee. It's not something HR could have done alone. We've had many meetings, and there are still more meetings to come to make sure that this actually works in practice, because we are just about to roll it out right after spring break. Another part with this, we did train all of our administrators and admin assistants. There was some confusion on who do I call? Do I call Lindsay, Debbie? Who's the person that I need to get a hold of? So this has made that process much more transparent for them to understand and know where the employee is. And the other piece that we're working on with the electronic forms is if we were to be audited. This man over here experiences that annually. We were unexpectedly audited in August, and so we're really looking critically at, do our forms have the ability to withstand an audit, and are we documenting all the ways that we're in compliance? So it's been a long, ongoing process. I've partnered with other HR directors to see how they're doing it, and then to try to make it work here for Lake Havasu. So speaking of audits, fingerprinting has been a major I will say achievement in my department. We started the year with brand new equipment. So our 2 office staff up front underwent training to make sure they're using that effectively. You can see there's a picture of the new machine. During that audit, we found areas that we were able to grow. Some of the positive changes resulted in how do we take privacy into consideration. So instead of inking out in the front lobby, we have actually restructured our offices, and we now have a private space where that can happen, because this machine will sometimes flash green and sometimes flash red, which can be a little unnerving if you're the person being printed. Our record-keeping processes and the storage and destruction of records was also reviewed. There were some things there that we were able to tighten up, and we've had a really positive experience in the changes that we've made, and staff have commented on, oh, this is different, this is nice. Oh, I get to come on back. So that's gone really well. The other half of fingerprinting this year is Arizona Revised Statute 15512 going into effect. I'm proud to say LHUSD is one of the top performing districts in achieving compliance on this requirement. I've worked hand in hand with the State Board of Education to make sure that LHUSD is doing right by the statute and also doing right by our employees. There was also a significant amount of time spent with our attorney to make sure that we were interpreting statute appropriately and keeping the safety of students as our top priority. So at this point, I'm happy to share that all staff are either printed or scheduled for prints, and we will be looking at revising contracts so that contracts reflect that this is a requirement of the position moving forward. And then July and August, again, it was a mad dash to get everything in place so that this could happen. We started with new hires, and now all of our existing employees are also through the process or scheduled to be done with it in the next month. The other half that we focused on is looking at how do we retain our employees? What are the systems and processes that impact employee satisfaction? How can we increase transparency and communication? One of the things we're trying to do is just solicit feedback often, and this is very informally. When we have people bring to our attention something that's not working, we just ask, how could we improve this? What would this look like in a best case scenario? And then we're trying to apply that feedback. Again, I mentioned Frontline is our human resources software. It does a lot for our employees. I would say this is probably their most highly touched piece of software from the employee perspective. This is their time card and attendance. This is where all their forms are housed. It's also where their evaluation occurs. And this is where we do all of our recruiting and hiring from. We started again with training because we're a new team. August through October, we did significant training, particularly in absence management. We basically, I would say, took what was there and kept the best, and then we checked it against policy to make sure that everything was aligned. Again, we partnered with Mr. Murray's department, and we coded things in Frontline so that they match and align to what's happening in Visions. I believe when IFAS went away and faded out, the changes in Visions didn't transfer over to Frontline. So we're working on that. That's not done. It's going to be a continual process. The other thing that our trainer brought to our attention was just really looking at who has access and who can see this employee information. So we did a lot of paring back on that and making sure that the right people had the right access. Central is another component of Frontline. We have heard and seen that the paper shuffle after a year of COVID is kind of a foreign idea because we did so much online. So in every season, we're looking at what are the forms that could really be done electronically via email. And just a few of them are listed up there. Our separations form, the ones that you all see that come before the board, those will now be electronic. Mandatory training, the evaluations have been electronic for a couple years. We're adding HETALK, our highly effective teacher observation cycle, into that. And then the hiring workflow, the job application, there's been extensive increase of electronic forms. All of our employees are thrilled about that. And then the last part is looking at reporting. Frontline has a lot of reporting features that we are trying to leverage more effectively because that's our employee data. So looking at tracking certification, when they expire, when do those IVP cards expire, looking at eval completion rates, and then, for example, at the high school, their administrative assistant that oversees athletics needed a specific report on how to pay for the coaches' subs. So we're just continually trying to apply reporting across all applications in Frontline. The FMLA process was a process that I had personally experienced twice as a teacher. It was very mysterious to me and how things flowed and what happened and how I did or didn't get paid. I reached out to our business department because this is another crossover area. We gathered feedback again and just tried to put together the pieces to see if we could clarify for our employees, and we realized there are several pieces and there are several hands that touch those different pieces. Since then, we have revised and created an employee-friendly flowchart to help them navigate FMLA. It tells them who, the what, where, when, why, and how, and then we are working collaboratively to sit down with those people in those circumstances and have that face-to-face conversation with all parties at the table, so they know from the onset this is the outcome of my FMLA leave. So far, we've done this, I don't know, half a dozen times, maybe a little more. Everyone's just grateful. We know when someone's on FMLA, unless it's for birth of a child, it is usually not a pleasant experience. So this has been, I would say, one of our major successes. Retention and compensation often go hand in hand. This year we were invited to participate in a salary study with another district. Again, a collaborative effort. HR provided salary ranges, the average pay, looking at days worked, what incentive or stipend pay is available. And then when the minimum wage increased, we did revise the initial placement structure, and we have been ongoing collaborative partners with the business department to look at what decisions will be made in this upcoming budget committee season. And then we've also partnered with ESI, our substitute source, to ensure that those rates are staying competitive as well. The other piece we've heard from our existing employees is looking at job-related growth opportunities. Our educational advancement regulation that you've all seen and reviewed was revised by the committee, and there was significant conversation around what warrants additional pay versus what is intended for maintaining certification or being current in your field. So there was clarified language on webinars, and then we looked at, we know we have a population that's ready to retire and highly skilled areas. We have an HVAC position open. We have other positions in payroll business that's going to be difficult to fill, and we want to incentivize our current employees to earn that bachelor's degree in a job-related area, because we know well-trained, well-skilled people will serve all of our employees better. So we did add 2 steps there. They can now confer their bachelor's, and then we did add another step after the bachelor's for our certified staff, but right before the master's degree is awarded. I personally experienced losing my AA to a competitor here in town because she could be awarded her bachelor's. She's a highly skilled employee, and I think if she had these opportunities, we might have been able to retain her.
With the competitive pay study, at some point could we see that? That would be wonderful to see.
Another element we look at when we look at retention is leadership. I can say for myself, working here on a frozen salary for about 8-9 years, I stayed because of the leader that I was working for. So we know principals have a tremendous influence and impact on retaining our staff. So I dove in this year with our administrators, and here are some of the 4 key areas that we met quarterly to review and discuss. Planning and goal setting oftentimes was, how do we stay staffed? Who are your subs? Who are your people you can count on? Working with the business department to find flexible ways to provide for coverage when we had massive shortages with staff. A lot of our conversations focused on that. But then we also really honed in on, how do you use your evaluation data? It really should be driving your decisions to set goals. It should help you to identify an internal pipeline of upcoming leaders, and then looking at that data to do both short-term professional development planning, but then also long-term professional development. Principals were very receptive to taking all of that information inside of those evaluations and seeing a bigger picture, and then looking at, how does this support all my goals? We also, because it's not been an easy year, we spent time just recharging and reflecting, celebrating successes as much as possible, which will take me into my next slide on employee recognition. With new administrators, we also did some training early on, walking through with them to classrooms, checking how they were scoring against how I was scoring, what feedback they would provide, and just ensuring consistency across the board there. We did adopt new administrator and director evaluation frameworks this year. We changed our admin performance pay, and all administrators presented at admin team on the Marzano book study related to their evaluation, and then just continuous training with Frontline and helping them to use that tool to its full capacity. Accountability, we did some training early on with our attorney on progressive discipline, really with the idea of discipline doesn't always have to be a bad thing. The root is disciple, it means to train. So how do we train our employees? What does that look like when they do respond or when they don't respond? And then really helping them hone in their improvement plans as needed, and then moving, unfortunately, to documenting and making sure that if it's time to part ways, that we've given the employee every opportunity. Now on to better things. Employee recognition, we have continued with the Golden Apple Award, thanks to our strong partnership with the K-12 Foundation. Our annual recognition, that's the District Teacher of the Year, Support Staff of the Year, Rookie of the Year. We are going to reboot that and try to get it back to pre-COVID times. So we look forward to honoring those people here in the coming months. And then this year we decided we needed something just a little bit more frequent and a little bit more, I guess, well-rounded. So based on our keynote speaker in July, we've created the Awesomizer Award. It's based on the book Culturize and the 4 core tenets of that book. So anyone in our district can be nominated. It's a peer nomination process. So far, approximately 45 staff have been recognized, and this is everyone from, you can see technology up there, to kindergarten. We've had maintenance staff, across every avenue. When someone does something amazing, we are really trying to encourage others to notice that and submit a nomination. So these staff get, you can see their little, they get a lanyard to start with, and then if they receive multiple nominations, they get some bling to attach to their lanyard. So far, this has been really well received, and it is probably the highlight of my day to get to go into kindergarten and have the kindergartners celebrate their teacher with me. And then looking ahead for next year, we know we're going to have some monitoring and adjusting in Frontline with that recruiting hiring workflow, moving from the pre-boarding to the actual hiring and then transition into business. We want to continue to build our partnership with business. They have a whole software visions that we know we could learn more about and maximize the exchange of info between our two teams. We also know that our support staff evaluation is long overdue for an update, so we hope to develop a committee and get that looking just a little more relevant to today's support roles. And then we would like to bring back the Aspiring Leaders Academy. I'm excited to get back into teaching leadership. It's been a little while, but I look forward to doing that with our adult learners. And then the other piece I want to just start toying around with a little bit is we don't have a true salary structure. So during the recruiting conversations, they often want to see, well, what do I make each year? How much will I earn next year? And it's very interesting to explain to them, well, that depends on our budget committee conversation. I can give them averages and estimates, but that is something that I do feel I want to just toy around with and see how can we get back to that. So, any other questions?
So we are getting ready to move on to student services, but before we do that, there comes a time in everyone's career when they look at that next step towards retirement, going off to be grandma and do some amazing things. And that time has arrived for Miss Aggie. And we just we're excited that she gets to celebrate the many things her department has done this year, but really to thank you for a great number of years of service in this district to our students and to our staff. And there will be more celebrations to come, but she has announced that to all of our teachers and staff, and I wanted you to be aware before she has her last celebratory presentation to you right now.
And I'll try not to cry, because obviously it's mixed emotions now. I am excited about my next chapter, so thank you. It's been an honor to serve for 25 years in our district.
Gosh, this is terrible. You have to click and control your stuff.
The hardest part is controlling the emotions right now. Just kind of an update where we are with our numbers, and special education has always been data-driven and paperwork process. We have a total of 800 students currently as of this week that have been identified or are currently being serviced on an IEP. In addition, we have another 206 students who are general education students that are being serviced on a 504 plan, which is an accommodation plan. And at this moment, we have 8 students that have been identified meeting the criteria of the McKinney-Vento. That's the definition of homeless within our district that are currently being supported. That number is fluid and changes as kids come into our district or family situations changes. The other area that we also overlook is foster care. We do have a number of students. At this time, we have about 4 students on our data, but we know that we're serving more than that. It's based on families reporting and when they do enroll those students coming through our community. Quality First is how we describe our preschool program, Smoke Tree and Little Knights. This is nothing new, but what I wanted to kind of bring up to date for the board is with COVID, we've kind of been in a holding pattern going through the evaluation process. They haven't come on site to do that evaluation process during the COVID situation for the last year and a half. Next year, they are planning on moving forward with that, so we'll probably go through our cycle. What that means, it's a comprehensive evaluation. It's looking at the areas that are identified on the slide for quality programs, which is the health and safety practices, our skilled teachers, our learning environments and opportunities for active play, and again, hands-on centers, and then again, child-center interaction. Preschool does follow the early childhood standards, and then we also align our programs and our curriculum with what's happening in kindergarten to ensure a smooth transition. We also do have an intergovernment agreement with Head Start. We did have one of our programs at Oro Grande closed due to the situation with COVID and not being able to staff that. That was not our agency, but what Head Start, WACOG went through, and so they had to do some restructuring at that time. Our agreement will most likely be changed as we move forward with that site not being included. We do still have a program at Havasupai, and then again, we support the childhood and transition programs through that intergovernment agreement. One of the things that I really, really want to recognize and appreciate, I think you heard it from Mrs. Bitterman, Jamie and I have worked, Mrs. Festa have worked closely for a number of years, but our departments this year have really been working hand in hand in a collaborative manner, and our staff have worked very much so. Again, it's about supporting all students as we're moving forward. The new curriculum adoptions and taking things to the next level with their new curriculum requires our support services to restructure, retool. We've aligned our intervention materials and resources, and we have done co-trainings on co-teaching. And we're continuing to provide that support as we're looking through that we're not just doing things in isolation. We're working together because, again, it's about building the capacity of all of our staff and supporting all of our families and our students to meet their needs and, again, achieve their educational goals. We plan to continue that moving forward. We restructured some programs, and then again, as we're talking about the intervention programs that we're talking about at the high school, is looking at how we're aligning what's going on with our special education programs as well. The area of inclusive practice is a focus, and what that really is a definition of is the time that our students that are identified as having an IEP are spending in their practices or their educational programmings in the general education classroom. We restructured our elementary programs to align more inclusive practice, reduce the amount of time they're being pulled out, doing more push-in services, and also staggering or layering our therapies as well in those earlier grades where it's appropriate, where we can do some push-in and work with those teachers and even go into some of the kindergarten classrooms and doing centers versus pulling out. So we're excited about that. It's for some, that's nothing new. For some, it was a change of mindset. So again, making sure we're looking at this district-wide. Next steps, of course, we want to continue to expand. We do need to look at our master calendar and schedules to allow for that, to make sure we are able to leverage those practices as we look at that. There's a lot of different grades, and when we have 2 resource teachers trying to support the 6th grades, it really has to be a master calendar or schedule that allows for that to happen. So we are excited, and again, we want to continue these practices to middle and high school. We have been looking at that, and we have been moving forward. But again, as we have kids transitioning, that it's consistent, and it's not something new. It's just a smooth flow as we go from one level to the next. One of the things that we are in is called State Systemic Improvement Process. This is due to our monitoring cycle. Last year we went through the monitoring process, which is 6 years. We started year 1 of SSIP. That's a new acronym that we will get to know very well in the next couple of years. But the SIP process, if you will, is that it's a systemic improvement. We're looking at our data. We're looking at doing specific practices. It's very much focused on literacy, but they do have us go through a comprehensive gap analysis, which is not focusing just on special education, but our systems from our Tier 1 to our Tier 3. Tier 1 being the general education, Tier 2 is intervention, as was mentioned, it's going to be a focus next year, and Tier 3 is those students who are requiring above and beyond that, which generally are students on IEPs or 504 plans. We do submit our data to the state quarterly for our subgroup, and then of course this is something that we're doing. That list right there is all the things we had to achieve this year. We have one more data submission we'll have completed and signed off on year 2 of our state systemic improvement process. We did receive data from our gap analysis. It's hard to read, but I will try to strain my eyes here. This is a very robust, detailed documentation of your action steps and implementation. This update makes great connections between your plan and the progress that is resulting from the plan. when we were told we had to go through this process, instead of it being one more thing that we had to do on top of everything, we looked at that and aligned it to what our practices were. And it's like, okay, how do we leverage the time and make sure it is, again, supporting their goals that we have? So we really did look at the entirety of that. And again, this wasn't just my department, this was our department that worked together. Our staff did these walkthroughs and observations, data collections, and reporting out. So it's very much a collaborative process. We are using the Council of Exceptional Students Children's book on high leverage practices, and that helped us to really target our professional development. Part of the SSIP was a crosswalk on these high leverage practices. We took those practices, we looked at what we were going to be focusing on with our goals, and look at the strands, if you will, of the practices that we felt we could get the most return on our time, and looked at where those practices were over and over and what we were looking at. So we did provide targeted district professional development for our teachers, and we also did a needs assessment, asking our administration to go through and looking at all of those, rating where they felt their schools were, and that what we consider part of our comprehensive needs assessment is helping us to determine and develop professional development for next year for each of the sites, a little bit more differentiation based on that data. We do have experienced administrators, and we have some brand new ones, so it's really about looking at the sites that we need to make sure we're meeting their needs and taking them forward. As was mentioned, our grants is supporting Pbis, that's the Positive Behavior Interventions and Support. This is nothing new to our district, but what is new is we did a retool. We've had some turnover. 12 years ago, we did implement this in our district at our elementary and the middle school, and we've had some turnover. And reality of COVID, you know, a lot of things kind of got put on hold, and then there was input and feedback from our administrators that they needed some updated professional development, so we're working with COI to provide that, a very comprehensive retool. Tier 1 is the most important foundation. You're looking at your practices for all students and systems. Your Tier 2 and Tier 3 cannot be effective if you don't have a strong Tier 1. This year we are retooling our Tier 1, and sites will be implementing changes for next year as we're moving forward. Excitement that I want to share is the high school is part of that process. This will be the first time that they have actually implemented, and again, they voluntarily came along with this. This is something that everybody is behind, so that's really exciting to see that. So again, next year we'll be focusing on Tier 2, but Tier 1 will be implemented for those sites like at the high school, and then they're putting in those changes that they have retooled or are retooling as we do the trainings throughout the rest of this year. We are a support department, and in order to do that, we have to make sure our toolkit is sharpened and our staff have what they need to support others in the field. Doing Tier 2, which is getting into more prescriptive supports based on children who are not being successful in the Tier 1, and then the next level of Tier 3, which is where special education is. We really need to have the ability to have a staff that has that capacity to meet the needs at their sites, and then we come in with additional supports. We did have a team of 5 go through training on the behavior intervention specialist training. Again, the goal of that is building capacity to better support our teams, provide professional development. That is the one thing going through the COVID is it's been a challenge, a lot of behavioral challenges. Many of our kids did not go to school. I mean, we provided services and we provided education in our community, but we've had kids come into our community that have missed 2 years of education or had not had education coming in and had to learn how to be in a school. And it's been a challenge for families, and there's been a lot of trauma that families have experienced with this as well. So we've seen increases in some of those challenges, and so again, we're working to build and expand our capacity to better support our community. Our goal again is next year is to have more staff go through that training, and then again continue with those professional development trainings for all sites. One of the other things that we implemented going into year 2, we've had a couple staff go through Dr. Bruce Perry's training on the trauma-informed care, or the neurosequential model. What is different about this is the behavior trainings is those staff where we're looking at, we have a specific plan, we're coming in, putting that plan in place. This is about the recognition and understanding the impact of children who are coming to our schools, and even adults that we work with that have been exposed to trauma, and helping to meet recognize, number one, and then helping to meet their needs. We do have to approach things differently for those children. They don't always respond in the way that we would put in our rules that we talk about Tier 1. And if we don't recognize that it's trauma versus a child just acting poorly because they're not wanting to cooperate, it makes the educational process very difficult. We are looking to expand our psychologist department. We have actually had 3 of our staff go through that training. Dr. Olson's in year 2. 2 of our other psychologists are going through year 1 this year, and then we have a teacher, because again, it's how we teach those students and looking at the classroom practices. Again, we have done awareness. We've done this now for 2 years, but we want to continue to build on that, because as we are recognizing this is becoming a greater need, and you're seeing this model being communicated through the behavioral health models as well. We're very thankful that we had the opportunity to expand our counselors at the elementary this year. Having a full-time counselor at every elementary school is new this year, and we are fully staffed in that department, so we're very excited about that. They have been working to build their program as a team and work collaboratively. We have an adopted curriculum, the Toolbox, and again, the Toolbox is a social-emotional learning tool. It's teaching them tools that they can apply so that they can make good choices and handle situations. A lot of our kids have struggled with the social-emotional piece, as we've said, going through COVID, and also just what we've seen with the changes with technology, kids making poor choices because they don't have the ability to communicate and interact in an appropriate manner on some situations. So helping them to recognize those skills and working through that. Our counselors, again, are working as a team, so we're excited about that process, and they're sharing that piece. I do have a little sample. It's hard to read here. I know some people think social-emotional learning. What is that? Well, really, it is just teaching them some of the basics. Like I said, deep breathing. It's a tool, and they talk about that. There's 12 key tools. How do you use that? The tape measure is the tool when we talk about the deep breathing exercises, learning how to count, calm down. How do you apply this? How can you recognize when you need to do that? Again, it's just teaching those strategies to the kids and how you can apply that in those conflicts when you're having peer-to-peer conflicts on the playground, and even in the classroom, being a good peer and role model. The middle school and high school have been very busy as well. I'm not going to read the entirety list, but as you can see, there's been a lot of events that they have done to support their students. The transition at the middle school, when we have our students coming over, they do things at the beginning of the year, they do things at the end of the year to plan for that successful transition for parents and students, obviously. The high school is really focusing on career and the events that they do to help students get ready, going on to college and applying and working through those things. And again, all that pre-planning, and right now they're very busy with those events with the pre-registration process. Major Clarity was approved by the board. It's a software program. This year was year 1 of implementation at the high school. Got off to a little bit of a slow start, just doing with COVID, with getting the systems to work and a data to be able to be communicated from one system to the next. It's up and running, and the counselors have been providing lessons to the students on using that. For those of you who are new to the concept, we do have a requirement of a 4-year graduation plan, and we have to upload that data to the state at the end of their senior year. This is the tool that we use to collect that for over the 4 years, but it's also a greater tool for our students to do their career and readiness and looking at that transition, developing portfolios, their resumes and events. There's lessons, and again, they have resources to be able to research career exploration. Next year, the 8th grade will be implementing, because we do start the students there in that transition piece. We're excited about that, so thank you for that support. We implemented STAR. STAR is a specific program, applied behavior analysis for our students with severe disorders, most of those dealing with cognitive impairments or dealing with autism. It's looking at the very strengthened approach of evidence-based practices on how to address behaviors, how to introduce things, very much task analysis. We added Rebecca Paling as a teacher on assignment this year. She is supporting our programs at the elementary and preschool with that implementation. We've had on-site coaching, and that will continue with the implementation as we look at that program. It's going to take a couple years to get that systemic, but they'll have a common language. And we are hopeful that many of the students who have been with us that have had the extreme behaviors that we've seen at the upper grades, that will be a great reduction because of the consistent practices from one program to the next as kids transition. The other department that we're very thankful that we have currently fully staffed is our health office. Actually, we're thankful for all departments to be fully staffed, but this was a challenge this year. We did have some revolving doors at some of the sites. At this time, we are fully staffed and they are moving forward with planning for next year. One of the things that we are looking at with having the increased nurses is really looking at our onboarding programs and supports and mentorship with having more nurses. You know, it's been a challenge. We've had a consistent core group and we've had a few retire, and we have a lot of new nurses, so we're looking at how we can better support them. As you all know, we have been going through a pandemic, and our nurses have been key to keeping our schools open and working with their parents to support them and supporting our staff. We have continued to maintain open communications with our partners, the health department, and at this time, what we are looking at is next steps. We are waiting, obviously, for the government to make some decisions, looking at the Department of Health Services as to whether there will be continuing the Emergency Act. We are anticipating some changes, and we're looking at what that's going to look like. COVID is not going away, but it is evolving, as you know, and we have to learn to make sure that we're putting things in place so that we can continue to support and keep our schools open for our kids and keep those environments safe and healthy. And that was our goal, and I can tell you that is an accomplishment, and it was achieved and has been achieved through team efforts, people stepping up. I know many of the people here have been in the classroom, they've been on the playground, they've been in the lunchroom supporting that. And again, it's whatever we needed to do to make things happen, and I do thank everybody for their efforts on that because it's definitely been a collective, collaborative effort. Speaking of which, this is just a list of some of the things that I know within my own department that our staff have done. We've been actually providing support on our buses to prevent bus route being closed. They've done an amazing job with the shortage that we've had, getting the buses to run the route, but not having support staff available for substitutes. My staff have come in early to cover and be on those buses to provide that support so that those routes are happening. Kids are coming to school and they're getting home. So again, the efforts have been great. We haven't focused today on what we couldn't achieve. You know, it's really been about what we've done. In fact, at the beginning, you would never have known we've been in a pandemic with all the amazing things that this team is focused on. So thank you for your efforts. We are continuing to grow our own, meaning we do have a few staff that have been working on moving forward with their professional careers. We do have one staff that's going to be going into an internship next year as a psychologist. We are anticipating some turnover in the near future. I won't be the only one retiring, but we do have a couple staff that we know that are very much at that point is what they've communicated, and that's a very hard to fill position. So we're excited that we've been building that. As you know, we've been contracting services for speech. We have one of our assistants at the point of her last year this year, so she'll be ready to apply for an opening, and hopefully my goal is in a year or so you won't have to have contracted providers, so we're excited about that. One of the other things we've done this year is provide some training on interpreting so that we can expand staff at each of the buildings to support our parents who do not speak English. We have focused primarily on Spanish. That is the one language that we have a great need for in our community, so we are expanding opportunities to have increased support. We have been providing support, but we have gone from a group of 5 to about a group of 13 qualified individuals that can do that training. Just kind of an update on where we are with their grants. These again were this year, so looking at that piece, our final allocation was right at over $1 million, and then our preschool grants right at $23,583. And then our school safety grant, which pays for 3 of our full-time counselors, is right at $200,504. We'll be going through the grant application process here again soon for next year. So you'll be hearing about that at the end of the year. For the July 1st is usually when we bring that back to the board. Just a picture visual about what we've been doing. And again, everybody, that's been our focus this year, whatever it takes.
Thank you, Aggie. And just to let the board know, when Aggie talks about her department supporting in all of those ways, being classroom subs, being administrator subs, every single department sitting here has done that in our schools this year. And it was very impressive for all of the people that stepped up to the plate and said, I will take that on to make sure we can stay open and our kids are served. And now we're going to move on to Mr. Murray.
Thank you. Before I start, I want to express appreciation to Dr. Stone and the directors to my right. I appreciate them probably more than I communicate to them. Just sitting here and watching their reports is just evident to me that we have important people in key positions in this district. And all things that they presented come through the business department in some way, shape, or form. Usually people like to request money, and that comes through my office when it comes to that. And I express my appreciation to them because they do try very hard to stretch every dollar. That's a tough thing to do, especially in this state. So in moving to my area of responsibility, I have 4 departments total. I'll start with the business department, where I spend the majority of my time. So in fiscal year 22, I broke out the presentation just in 2 columns. Fiscal year 22, meaning this year, and then fiscal year 23, what we can anticipate and what we're planning on and looking forward to going into next year. So fiscal year 22, behind us we have the budget, annual financial report, and audits are now complete. Next month, you can see there in bullet point 2, what used to be called the CAFR is now the ACFR. It's the annual comprehensive financial report versus the comprehensive annual financial report. Why they switched those 2 around, I have no idea. Somebody needed to justify doing something, I would guess. So the ACFR single audit and USFR questionnaire will come before you for a motion to accept. Our practice in this district has been to bring it before you anyways, especially the comprehensive annual financial report and the the single audit. Now by statute, all districts in the state are required to bring it before the board for a motion to accept. Not necessarily to approve or not approve, but just accept the fact that it has been completed and recognizing that it's been completed within the district. And like I said, that'll happen. Our goal is to bring it before you next month in April. FMX is a software system, software tool. We just engaged with them about a month and a half or so ago. They are a software management system that provides much needed supports to the operations of a district or any group or entity. We are starting the process of engaging with them and making this go live pretty much any day now. We could make it go live tomorrow if we wanted to. We're not quite ready from a staffing side of things, but we're taking a step in the direction of facility scheduling with them. We're trying to, like other departments have communicated, we are trying to move away from paper pencil as much as possible. We're trying to keep things digital. We're trying to keep things in a platform that is cloud-based, easy to pass on information from one group to the other or individual to the other, and not sending paper via inter-office mail. So facility scheduling, like I said, ready to go live. That'll involve booking our facilities. So our facilities booking will also include those who are out in the community. Eventually there'll be a link on our website for the community to click on, and they'll be able to complete a request to schedule our facilities via the website through that link. Our internal functions will also be the same. So our administrative assistants and principals, they'll be able to book their facilities by scheduling them through this platform, and that'll allow all of us to be able to see the events that are happening at each site. The approval process will flow much better, we feel, and what we've seen in this system that's set up in a series of permissions and workflow. So as someone schedules a particular facility, we schedule it to where, or set it up to where that workflow will cross the desks of the needed individuals. and it'll streamline the approval process and scheduling process, hopefully immensely. The transportation module, there is a transportation scheduling module. We are looking to follow up with that once we get the facility scheduling module off the ground and work out any bugs that we see within the system internally. Facilities use, the last bullet point in FY22, facilities use came before you in a work session several months ago with Tosca. You'll recall Tosca was on the phone with us. No, she was actually present that day. She was here with us and talking about the facilities use manual and statute. We do get quite a few individuals as well as groups wanting to use our facilities at no charge. We're trying to streamline and update our process so that we are completely in line with statute. That is just about ready to go and come back before you, following up with you in April or May. So we're hoping to have all of this in line with the facility scheduling module in place so that we can just take off going into the summer months and next fiscal year. Fiscal year 23, again, more of the same with budget, annual financial reports, and audits. Those are things that happen each year, no matter what. Bond Series C, that is our third and final issuance of the bond. We are looking to schedule that as going out for sale sometime in November or December. So that's something that we'll have our bond counsel and bond financial individuals here, a group here, Stiefel, who will come and present before you as well, so you can see the proposed tax implications from a Series C issuance. Override renewal conversations are beginning. They are ongoing. We're trying to make sure we have key people who have helped us in the past, make sure that they're mindful of our intention of having this conversation to determine whether or not we go out for a renewal and actually put it on the November ballot. Obviously, those will be conversations that you'll be more deeply involved in as well as we move here in the next month or so.
Are we going to call the committee that did this last time?
That's what we're looking at right now. We're looking to see what their level of commitment is and interest level, and then see if that actual committee will come back together or if it will involve others.
Call Steve Greeley.
Correct.
He's the right person.
Yeah, we're reaching out to him just out of respect for knowing that he was instrumental in the process before and seeing if he's, obviously a lot of years have passed since then, so we're not sure what their availability is at this point, but we are going to reach out to him.
I'll help him if he needs it. I'm serious, I will.
Okay.
I was a part of the last election.
We feel that there's many who are willing to participate. We just want to make sure that key people are identified and given the first option to either commit or to not. We want to, out of respect, approach those same individuals to make sure that we don't offend by going around them and engaging with somebody else. iVisions, staff portal migration right now. In iVisions, we have a platform that all staff can access. Visions themselves are trying to upgrade that platform, make it more up-to-date and user-friendly, but what we're seeing in the portal and in the communications community, there are still some bugs that are in the system, so there are districts who have made that jump already, but are now frustrated with that jump into the new portal. And so what we're trying to do is hold off as long as possible until Visions actually makes us do it. So that way we hope that Visions will work out all of those bugs before we take the leap and then start frustrating our people. So we're mindful of the concerns, and we're just trying to hold off as much as we can until they fix it. Because right now what we have is sufficient, and we don't want to frustrate people. Any questions with the business office? Okay. Food service. Just prior to this meeting, I was actually checking my email. We received an update to a survey that Anne participated in through the USDA. It was a food and nutrition survey, and in our participation, and I'm sure many throughout the United States participated. It was interesting to see the results because what appears to be national concerns are clearly aligned with our concerns. Just a couple quick points that I noticed out of it. 92% of those who participated acknowledged supply chain disruptions. We're experiencing the same. I don't think that's any shock to anyone. It's clear throughout the news that there are some supply chain disruptions. Many are experiencing procurement challenges when it comes to food and supplies. We're no exception to that. We're experiencing the same. And 73% of those who responded are identifying as having staffing challenges, which is very much in line with what we're experiencing here locally. So in FY22, just a couple of highlights. The federal food programs, expanded free meals, that is ongoing at this particular time. The future of that is unknown. That's kind of over there in fiscal year 23. The continuation at this point, whether that's going to extend in the next school year, is just unknown at this point. We're hoping that we'll receive some updates here in the coming weeks. Staffing shortages, again, as shown on the survey as well that we just received, but that is definitely something of concern in our food service department. Supply chain issues, again, so this PowerPoint was created days ago, whereas this survey just came through today. And then the food service department ordered 30 lunch tables for elementary schools this year, as well as 3 for the middle school. That was based on inspection of those tables and also administrator input and FSP input. We're trying to make sure that our equipment is functioning properly and that we're doing our best to save, especially our FSPs, save their backs, because when you don't have a functioning lunchroom table, it can lead to workers' comp issues because they're extremely heavy when they're not working properly. So repairs are made when needed, and then those that are beyond repair are replaced, and that's the result of those that were beyond repair. Fiscal year 23, again, continuation of the food programs unknown. Staffing is still a concern going into fiscal year 23 because of unknowns. Hopefully come July, August, that'll be a bright spot where we're actually filling positions, but again, at this point, the state of the country and the world, it's a lot of unknowns as to what our staffing will look like going into next year. Supply chain, same thing. Right now, supply chain issues, we're strategically purchasing, looking way ahead to see if there's anything that we can get our hands on that are non-perishable, that will last for an extended period of time. When that happens, we look to purchase in bulk as much as we can. Food trays are an example of that. Food trays we can store for a long time. So when they come available on the market at a reasonable price, because everything's inflated now, but at a reasonable price, we do our best to grab as many as we can because we don't know what the future is going to look like. Equipment going into fiscal year 23, we continue to just assess needs and we purchase based on those needs, just like the lunch table example. We assess and then we look at budgets and then we purchase when and where we can. Warehouse fiscal year 22, this year you'll recall that we have started to keep a standing agenda item in the consent section of the board meeting agenda. So disposal of equipment is forever now embedded in your consent area of the agenda. Consistency and approval and disposing of the equipment that we have is the goal. That's why we have this standing agenda item. Disposal methods will pretty much be posted pricing on our district website or utilizing the auction sites for surplus items. Supply chain issues continue to be an area of concern, not just in food service, but in warehouse. Food supply chain issues, we had Todd present to our administrators about a few weeks ago and just shared some examples of those supply chain issues and also the inflation of the cost of goods. There are some things that are just extremely difficult to get our hands on where we used to be able to order it and get it a day or two later. Those days are not existing right now. Inflation of goods is something that we're always mindful of. He shared some examples to administrators that I think was very relevant and what they needed to hear. For example, I believe he was saying that a 12 pack of pens used to be $2 and some odd cents, and now it's $9 for that same pack of pens. So when administrators are hearing that, it allows them to kind of rethink what they're ordering, maybe keeping a better eye on what their staff are requesting from the warehouse, so that we're making sure that what we're requesting is actually a need and will be used rather than something that is a want and that gets tucked away in a closet or in a desk and never gets used. You stumble across it a year or two or three later and realize you had that in the back of your desk. In FY23, moving from or kind of adding on to and building upon the disposal of equipment, we are looking to now go out and clean up sites. We're noticing that there are closets that are forgotten, and when you open the closet, you realize that there's some things in there that probably either A, need to be reallocated or reassigned to another building that's going to use it, or if it is that old and non-usable, it needs to be disposed of properly so that we can start decluttering spaces. Supply chain, again, continues to be just a concern going into fiscal year 23, and inflation, both of those extremely unknown at this particular time.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you to pause for a moment? I hate to do this, but I have to leave as well.
Okay.
And so when I do, there won't be a quorum anymore. Okay. I'm so
I
sorry.
have one last slide.
Okay, then that's perfect.
Two last slides. I'll go through fiscal year 22 and 23 for transportation. So personnel continue to be a concern, and vehicles, all of those have come before you this year for order. They're still on order. We're waiting for them to be delivered. More than likely, those are going to be pushed into fiscal year 23 and actually received in fiscal year 23, the way supply chains are going right now. Fiscal year 23 for personnel, routes and activities, just want to quickly point out, we've sat down with departments, with our transportation department and the administrator, principal at both Thunderbolt and the high school. So something to be aware of. There's a talking point right now, an area of conversation, because as we move into next school year, it's no secret, we've had some driver shortages. We've had to send out unwelcomed and unwanted communication to our students and staff, our students and parents, closing down a bus route for an afternoon or for the day or for an extended period of time or even indefinitely. Those are real concerns and real challenges affecting not only the district, but also affecting our parents and students. So we had some conversations about what do we do with that if this continues. So that conversation basically focused on two possible areas to address. One of them being that we go to a staggered start and stop time for our schools, so that we're not all starting at 8 o'clock and not all getting out at 2:30-ish. Because if we move to a staggered start and stop time, we could then dispatch our buses to the middle school, let them perform their pickup and drop-off routes, and then move over to the high school or vice versa, and do the same, using the same set of drivers for multiple locations, whereas now we're hiring drivers for 2 locations all at one time. That's option 1, or talking point number 1. Talking point 2 would be to eliminate and reduce routes. That would probably primarily be or a strong possibility, especially with administrator conversation, that we have 3 routes at the high school right now, that possibly suspending those routes going into next year and only offering transportation services, regular ed transportation services at the middle school. The amount of bus drivers that we've lost or have yet to hire, that would probably cover all of Thunderbolt's routes, but then that would be at the expense of the high school. Going to fiscal year 23, you can see there's proposals, obviously purchasing 3 new buses as part of the bond rotation plan, some white fleet purchases to rotate our old travel vehicles, purchasing 2 to 3 vehicles possibly, and then 2 to 3 passenger vans for student and staff travel. That would allow for our smaller groups of kids, as far as like maybe 6 golf kids that are going to Kingman or Phoenix, instead of putting them on a 50 passenger bus, that we put them in a 15 passenger van with their coach. As long as the start time and end time of the event doesn't make the coach, doesn't cause him to stay awake for an extended period of time. So if he's teaching or she's teaching all day, and then we're asking them to drive to Phoenix and stay there all night and come back at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, that wouldn't work, because it would create some safety issues. But if that driver is leaving at 10 o'clock in the morning, going down to compete and coming back that evening, that would definitely be doable. Saving our activity driver for another type of a route or another event versus driving a bus that requires a commercial license.
We did that approach several years ago. We actually had
Correct.
our staff driving small vans,
Correct.
and it didn't work out well. It wound up in court.
Well, there was also some, and that's why I just explained the scenarios. I think that was part of the issue, is that we need to be mindful and treat our drivers like CDL drivers. We need to honor the fact that they can only be on the road and working for so many hours, so that we eliminate that driver fatigue. So that is going to be the criteria in order to have someone actually be out on the road. Like I just gave that example. They can't teach all day, drive to Phoenix that evening or afternoon, and then expect to come back that night, late into the night or in the morning. So that'll all be part of some future conversations as well. Maintenance FY22, building renovations are now in the pre-construction phase for Havasupai in Jamaica, much like what we did at Oro Grande and Starline over the last 2 years. Construction approval, right now they're in the quote and bidding, or not in the formal bidding process, but they're in the process of gathering quotes, giving us a number of what we could expect those estimates to look like. If they are not completely out of line, more than likely we'll be coming to the board in April or May for some type of construction approval. Improving district and site communication, so we're re-emphasizing point of contact. We're trying to bridge the gap between our district and our sites to make sure that our district representation is clearly communicating with our site representation and vice versa, so that way those who are at the school sites know exactly when and what the district should be doing to help support them, and what the site should be doing before the district engages to support them. So we want to make sure that's clearly out there in writing, and that point of contact is clearly established, so we're not calling different people and then the person who needs to know is not really in the know. So that's in the works for the remainder of this year, moving into fiscal year 23. Fiscal year 23, building renovations will continue. There's no way that we'll be able to finish by June 30th if we start those renovations at those 2 schools. That'll carry forward into fiscal year 23. A facility condition assessment is an assessment on our buildings, HVAC, everything that we own and can touch, anything that may be in need of repair. We are looking to procure services to have a company come out and actually assess our buildings, and then use a software system to be able to store all that information, to record all of the equipment, HVAC units, everything that we could possibly need to repair or replace, like I said, recording that in a database so it's not in a 3-ring binder stuck up on a shelf that never gets updated and no one looks at, and then That'll also tell us what life expectancy would be on those pieces of equipment and potential or estimated replacement costs for those pieces of equipment. That'll help us in the budget process moving forward, so that if maintenance, for example, we come to find out of that database that out of the however many air conditioning units we have in this district, that 10% of them are well beyond their useful life expectancy, they're 20 years or older, we could budget for replacing those units before they become a real issue and systematically keep our equipment in the district functioning, so we're not being reactive, we're being proactive in making sure that everything is functioning. Series C bond issuance, as I mentioned in a previous slide, in the business department, will use that money that will be allocated and sold and given to us. Maintenance will look at that dollar amount and look at the needs of the district, hopefully using this assessment tool and software to then spend those monies very wisely and not just throwing money at problems when they arise or guesstimating what may or may not go wrong. We can actually use real information to make informed decisions.
So I just wanted to thank all of our directors. That was a great deal of information. I'm very grateful to have them as a team, very proud of the work that they have done. And it was also a lot of work to put this together, so thank you for all of that. We do have one other agenda item today, and I'm just providing information to you. So I know at some point Mr. Masden talked about having a discussion about our membership in ASBA. There's no decision being made today. It is simply me providing you with the information that we have. I gave you some information on yearly membership and the cost of that and the things that come with that yearly membership, the price for Policy Bridge, the yearly law conference, if people do choose to attend that. And just a reminder that Arizona House Bill 2739 is the bill that would prohibit schools from spending tax money on membership in school board associations. It's currently still in committee. I don't know if it will come out of committee this year, so that may or may not be an issue. And policy manual, we talked about the fact that the most important thing that a school board membership does for us is Policy Bridge. The idea is that they are keeping their hands on any state or federal law changes and getting that to school boards, so we're able to make sure our policies are compliant. The trust is still developing a policy, and we are looking forward to seeing that late spring, possibly for adoption at that time. So it's really all of the information that goes into this discussion, and I don't know if the board wants to discuss it now, has time to discuss it now, or would like to bring this back at a later time. But this is the information that you need for that discussion.
I think we need to bring it back for a later time.
I have thoughts, but not time today.
Yes, yes.
I agree, we should always be considering this.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. One last thing is I just want to thank all the directors and Dr. Stone again. They say talk the talk and walk the walk. Today was the talk. But hearing all that information and what you were doing the day-to-day, the walk, with walk the walk, that really comes into play. Hearing that you're doing lunchroom duty and things like that, that makes all the difference. People are seeing that. That's what leadership is, aside from doing all the other things you're doing. And people really do notice when you do those things. Other than that, I think I just need to have a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Eric Coran,
Yes.
Lisa Roman,
Yes.
John Masden.
Yes.
We're adjourned. Yes.
Sorry about that.
So you can get reset up for later.
Yes, I can.